It is over. 4 years. 2 days away from 4 years, fam. And it's over. Just walked out of court, took off my jacket, and case dismissed against Alfredo Luna, who you guys know as Alpha. It is over. I'm free again. A lot going on right now. My name, I get back. Don't have to look over my shoulder. Start the process, getting off this Quad S. However, I don't even know how that's going to happen, but I am free. Rejected every plea. Stood my ground on my innocence. And even when I was told over and over and over, you gotta plea, you gotta plea, you gotta plea, I knew what was right. I knew all the criminal things that went into trying to bring a case against me. The media destroyed my name, or tried. My Second Amendment was taken from me. Everything. They dropped the civil case a few years ago, for those who've been following my story. And then this was the criminal matter. This J6er is free today.
And good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Steel News. I'm Vandersteel. Yes, you are entering the war zone, and this J6er is still free by the grace of God, because I was there that day, as were over 1 million of all of you. And again, I contend everybody in this country is a J6er today, and we have been at the hands of this lawless regime that we're now looking at T-minus 5 days. Good riddance, you pedophiles squatting over at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. We've got a great show for you today. I just want to let you know we are back on my old Rumble channel. Yes, I spoke to the CEO of Rumble personally, and I want to give him, Chris, a shout out. Thank you so much for looking at the evidence and recognizing that I could not possibly have a copyright violation on my own content. That was an erroneous copyright file claim that took my original channel down, and it is back. That's right. It is back along with all my old content. So if you look in the Rumble description box, you will see that that channel is also available. So we're going out to a lot more people today, and we're excited to be back again. Thank you, Rumble, for seeing it for what it really is, a fraudulent filed claim. We have got two incredible segments today, starting off with our J6 segment, because we are talking about getting out of this slave nation. We are going to free ourselves and restore the republic. My first guest, Alfredo Luna. You know him as the Alpha Warrior, decorated Marine combat. I met this gentleman 3 years ago at a Reawaken America tour in San Diego. And frankly, he changed my life. And the minute I met him, I said, dude, you are the next Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan, as big and as wonderful as he is on some aspects, others I don't agree with. I think Alpha has what it takes to go all the way if he so chooses. It depends how much of an apple does he want to bite out. But he is a decorated Marine combat veteran, so I know he's got the mustard to take it as far as he wants. He's been awarded the Law Enforcement Medal of Valor. He survived 4 shootings as a police officer. And after having to go through everything he went through with the accusations of being a J6er and $250,000 in bail, tossed into solitary confinement and endless attacks by the government, Alpha was left to fight this alone. And like a lot of Americans that just sort of acquiesced, they pled out. Alpha didn't. He went toe-to-toe with this lawless regime from the DOJ. And even though he was arrested Inauguration Day on January 20th of 2021, stemming from a prior search of his home that turned up what they say was an unregistered rifle. He was at the time a Palm Springs Unified School District police officer. And because he was, basically summoned into based on social media posts, thought crimes, everybody. Hello, Minority Report. We're living in it. That's right. We are living in it. He was classified a domestic extremist by the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force, which led to his arrest. And of course, he pled not guilty because he's not guilty of domestic extremism. Even though they try to put him into a felony position, he is not guilty of it. You have a freedom of speech, a First Amendment to say what you think. And again, based on this prior search, Luna, Mr. Alpha, was arraigned at the Larson Justice Center, and he was arraigned out on custody of $250,000 in bail. Court papers allege that Alfredo, who, as I said, was a former Cathedral City police officer, was part of this whole QAnon conspiracy theory movement. And they tried to classify him as a right-wing militia group member, which, of course, led to what they believe was the insurrection on J6. Folks, I contend there's nothing wrong with being a right-wingist any more than there is if you want to be a left-wing nut. Go ahead, be all the much of a nut you want to be. And militia is constitutionally protected in our Second Amendment. So if you so choose to be part of a militia, the government is supposed to call forth the militia. Read the Constitution. It is all in there, people. This is not stuff I'm making up. It is legitimately in there. And Alfred, I love calling him Alfredo Luna, my buddy Alpha Warrior is here now. Alpha, it is great to see you. It is 4 years ago today when this bullshit started, and I am so glad to see that you are a free man. Case dismissed.
Case dismissed. And as a matter of fact, it's 9:07 Pacific time. At this exact hour, I was about 15 feet from where I am right now in my backyard, with 4 FBI SWAT operators around me, and them beginning the interrogation forced against me because I had asked for an attorney, and everything started from there. And I want to say this: first, glory to my Creator, God above. And the next one is my family, my circle, because they're the unnamed victims of the government, because everybody knows my story, but they don't realize, well, they probably do realize this, a lot of people don't acknowledge it. They had to suffer this too.
Right.
There's my stepdaughter, when this went down, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks later, a bird hit our back slider and it set off the alarm to the house. And she comes running and crying into the room. She thought it was the SWAT team again. Those are the stories and things, how it impacted their little lives.
Wow.
The next people I want to thank is my friends and the audience, and people like you and Pete and so many others that gave me an ability to share my story. And without that, this would have been so much harder, because everybody gives you a moment for a title and a headline, and then after that it's on to the next thing. But so many of you stayed in that corner. Hey, what else do you need? How can I help you? Hey, do this and do that. And that really allowed me to fight, because I'll tell you what, when you're taking on the largest government in the world with an open checkbook to prosecute you, all you have at that point is just faith.
Yeah.
Like that's it. And just knowing that I had to stand up for what was right. So many people ask, whys, and there's a lot of whys, but one of the most important ones is, and you mentioned it, in the monologue, I was a combat veteran. I saw friends get hurt and I saw friends die. I was a law enforcement officer. They tried to kill me, and one of my best friends, died in front of me in the line of duty. If I would have submitted to writing guilty on a piece of paper, knowing that it was a lie and not true, all that was in vain. And there was no way I was ever going to let that happen.
Good. And you shouldn't. I mean, this is, at the end of the day, truth wins out. The wheels of justice, as they say, are incredibly, almost painfully slow, very painfully slow. I mean, I explained I've had a Rumble channel that was taken down because somebody filed a copyright claim, and it was an unjust copyright claim. It was bullshit, in fact. And I spoke to the CEO about it finally and got it rectified, but it took a year and a half. And what did that cost me in terms of my ability to get the messaging out and what little I monetize? It cost me, right? That was designed to shut me up and and hurt me. This is what I do. This is my living. I travel, right? What does this cost you besides the emotional toll, the familial toll, which you can't even put a price tag on, right? You can't put a price tag on that because you were literally the focus of the government monolithic bureaucratic machine designed to shut people up like you and eliminate you, erase you from society. What did that cost you financially to go through all this?
It cost me everything. As a matter of fact, unless the grace of God changes things, I'll be in debt for the rest of my life, paying off a lot of these bills that resulted from this. They made me a quad. I was one of the first quad Sers. I discovered this back, I think it was like April or May of 2021 when I went to take a flight to Dallas.
You and me both.
I around the same time I get a couple of letters from Bank of America, which I had been banking with since I was 17 years old. I'm 44 now, and I got debanked. They said you have 21 days to remove your funds from this. Gave no reason. Said you cannot appeal this decision. So thank goodness I had a backup plan for something like that. Actually, I'm free, so I don't have to worry about it now.
Yeah,
I was part of a credit union at the time from the military. So thank goodness I had that because if I didn't, I don't even know how I would have been handling banking. But my
right.
main bank, took it down. And even though I was in the fight for my old job back, which I had won, I had my resume, glory to God, is a very good one. And so I was applying at all these places in the interim and immediately hired. And not only just hired, offered bonuses, offered like really good incentives. And then they would do the background check. And that FBI pending case would pop up. And then they would have to rescind the offer. And so finally, one of these gentlemen, he was a real cool guy. He says, "Hey, look, man, uh, with your resume, I know we probably weren't the first ones you came to. So this is probably, you probably haven't been told, but this is what we saw." He goes, "So until this is over, you gotta stop applying because even if you win and this is off your record, it's in our internal records. So even when you
Wow.
come back, you're gonna be judged on this." He goes, "So you can't apply at any of these things until this is done." So at that point, I was left with either working at a fast food place or figuring it out. And that's when I said, "You know what? Let's grab a mic, let's grab a camera, and let's talk about it. Let's
Yep.
tell everybody what's going on." So, but and then there's the other things, the things that aren't measured monetarily. There's, your name. You're watching the local media. I mean, they do it on the mass media, but local media is your backyard. These are the
Yeah.
people you shop with, the people you see, and they just paint you out to be this most dangerous person. They're talking to your neighbors. Thank goodness I have good neighbors, but they just and then listen, my kids they're older. They're the high school age and older. What they have to get through their friends. Now, even though they have good friends, they're still living under this blanket of shame for something that none of us did.
Yeah. I can empathize in a lot of this with you because I've gone through the mud even before J6. I've had trolls that have literally tried to destroy me and have done the most unbelievable things, including screenshotting me on podcasts, whether I was on Steve Bannon's show or whatever, and then writing things across the meme saying, "We're going to kill you." But they don't send it to me. They would text it to my children. Now you have to, my children aren't public. They are not, their stuff isn't out there. And they certainly don't publish their cell phone numbers. How did they get the cell phone numbers of my children? Well, that tells you that's government, right? This is the United States government attacking. And this all started to happen after J6. So it was, this is the kind of stuff people like us and you obviously far worse than me. And then, of course, the people that are in prison right now, unjustly so, have had to sustain from a lawless regime that stole the election and basically conquered us in a coup d'etat. And we're finding out at a mass level just how complicit the federal government has been. In fact, I know there's a lawsuit that's been filed. Jason Fig is going to come on and talk with me about this, but he has helped develop this lawsuit for the Bollingers and for Mike Adams, the Truth About Cancer folks, and Mike Adams, Health Ranger, against the United States government for their role in the censorship. And it is absolutely massive. It doesn't just include our government, but it's conspiracy with other governments around the world to silence people. And they've used so many tactics. So essentially, what they did to you was try to silence you and erase you and make you bankrupt and disappear. But you fought back and you fought back with your voice, which is why it has always been protected, our First Amendment. I want you to kind of walk us through a little bit, Alpha, about that journey for you to step into the mic because I met you about that time when you first stepped up, and I was like, "Wow, who is this guy?"
No, absolutely. So I had been watching a lot of podcasts and alternative media, and I saw that a lot of people were taking the information right there, but there was just a little bit more that I knew was there, and I wouldn't see a whole lot of people talking about it. Sometimes nobody, and it was very frustrating. And I understand that there was a lot of people that you knew was immediately deplatformed on because you didn't have a lot of places to run to once you got deplatformed and your voice removed from you. And so I said, you know what? What the heck? I'm going to give this a shot. I never would have thought I would have been behind a microphone and a camera. I didn't even like doing sound bites as a detective when the media wanted to know something about a homicide or an investigation. But I said, let's just give it a shot. And I knew it would take time, to develop notoriety for people to develop the trust in me. And so I hear about this Reawaken conference, and I'm like, a lot of great voices are going there. Let me just see who I can get to talk to me. And you and another great gentleman, a lot of people I met, but you two are the ones that stood out in this because when I walked away from it, and I'm glad you remember when you made the Joe Rogan comment, that has sustained me so many times. And when I was like,
It's true.
this is rough. This is rough. And I was just like, you know what? If she saw it in me and others saw it in me, I got to remember to keep seeing this in me and just keep pushing because it's frustrating when you get deplatformed. I was doing a live stream. This is back in the old Twitter days, excuse me,
Yeah.
with Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. And YouTube and Twitter took me down right in the middle of the live stream. And so when you lose, your two biggest audiences, you're just like, now what? And it's you just got to rebuild
Yeah.
and try again. And so it's been doing that. Now I wouldn't what happened to me, I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but at the same time, I wouldn't wish it didn't happen to me. And the
Yeah.
reason being is as awful as it was, it also put me in a position to help way more people than I ever would have as a police officer.
Oh
The
gosh, yeah.
the stories, the emails, the DMs, the cards that people mail, sharing the impact of a guest I brought on, or a story I shared, or insights, or an analysis that I gave to see how it helped people make critical decisions in their life. That makes it worth it. And so, even before we got to the news of them dismissing my case, I knew even if this doesn't turn out the way I want, and this corrupt judicial system puts me behind bars for a period of time, I still won. I still won because they can't undo the impact I've had on all these people.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And frankly, that is what I think sustains anybody that decides to put themselves out there like you do, like I do, like many do now. I mean, when I first started doing this, the amount of voices out there were very few. Today, there are millions of people out there that are stepping up and having an impact because we are all seeing the facts lay bare before us for what they really are, which is true tyranny that is coming at us in the form of our United States government, all of their agencies, which are unconstitutional, and of course, the collaboration of other governments worldwide. And because of citizen journalism, which is now by far eclipsed mainstream media anywhere in the world, we're getting the truth out there about Macron's wife, who Justin Trudeau is, Joe Biden and Hunter and his pedophilic tendencies, and not everything. It's all coming out there. They can't stop it now. Even the great FBI has now been exposed as being nothing but a bunch of brown shirted thugs that are domestic extremists. They are the Nazis in our country trying to silence us. And while they're projecting that on all of us, they in fact are the true Nazis that are acting as such. And I say that, and I don't mean disrespect to the few that are in there still that are good. And there are a few. But at this point, I have to say, if you're not one of the whistleblowers being one of the good guys, then I can't really defend you anymore at this point. So you put out a post when you got your case dismissed. And I want to put that up because this post is, first of all, was exciting to me. It was great to hear from you yesterday about this. And you're putting out there that, whoops, what just happened? Sorry about that. We won. The government has dismissed its J6 case against me today. I did my best to keep my composure in this video. And this is the video I played. But obviously, there's a lot of emotions today. I'll be covering my story in depth live tomorrow morning on Kyle Serafin's show and on Friday night with Pirate Radio with Real Person Politics. That's James R. And I look for an article soon with CanCon. Actually, I used to work with James, by the way, at Your Voice America. There are so many of you to thank. And I will do my best to thank you all over the next few days. Just know that my heart is very grateful reaching every one of you. These three men have become my brothers. And it's a really beautiful, heartfelt message. I love the message. And of course, General Flynn responded, I responded. But from there, we started to see the trolls come out. And this is where I say, it's difficult when you put yourself out there, but there's people out there that are basically calling you a fraud. You're not really a J6er and all, on and on. And that has just been, to me, I think that is the ultimate in insult when you do that, because these people have not walked a mile in your shoes. So tell me a little bit about that, what it was like to see some of the comments come in. And I'm going to actually, right here, this one, Jenna Ryan, this is not a J6 case. Tell me about seeing that and what you learned from this particular comment and where it developed for you.
Well, I guess the benefit of this battle taking 4 years is in this 4 years of becoming a part of alternative media. You realize if you put something out and it's impactful, the trolls are going to come out. So
Right.
I knew that this post was going to bring people out. I didn't realize this was the angle that they were going to take. I figured it was going to be more of the insurrectionists,
Yeah.
Orange Man bad and you guys shall be locked up. And there was a few of those. But when I saw this where, you know, you're not really a J6er, this is not a J6 case. I'm like, if one, I understand that within the J6 community, there's been a lot of controversy and that there's some people that have, there are people that have exploited this. I understand that. And so I can understand people having initial suspicions. I can understand people going to the DOJ website and putting in Alfredo Luna Jr. and they're like, hey, wait, I don't see him here. But then
Right.
reach out to me so then you can get an understanding of how this is a J6 case, because then you'll learn that the words out of the investigators, the first words out of these investigators' mouth was, hey, we're here investigating the incidences around J6 and your social media has been reported to us about that because you want to disrupt a future event. Like, this is their words, not mine. And then on top of that, there was some other ones that put, you don't call yourself a J6er. You haven't been through what we've been through. Then that just tells me you haven't read my story or listened to my story, because I was thrown into solitary confinement. My bail is one of the highest bails for people that were granted bail. I'm on the quad S like everybody. I was
Mm-hmm.
debanked like everybody. And
Mm-hmm.
even mainstream media, granted it's mainstream media, but they still put my story out there with all the other brothers and sisters in J6. So when they started doing this, I was just like, and then I noticed it all came kind of together, and then they all were commenting together. So,
Yeah.
my job as a detective was operational planning. So I immediately said, there looks like there's a there here. So let me start
Mm-hmm.
looking into some of these profiles. And then I saw something very consistent. All the people that were calling me a fake J6er are also people that have attacked people like General Flynn and you and others, the quote
Yep.
unquote Flynn network. And that's when I was like, oh, this makes sense. Because
Yeah.
and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. If you want to say that I'm grifting off the J6 movement, how about you talk to the J6ers out there? Because when I started my podcast, there was three goals that I had. The first one was being a voice for all of us J6ers. The second one was talking about that thing they wanted to put into everybody's body. And then the third thing was talking about the elections that they also didn't want to talk about. These were my three main objectives. And so from that point, I have had dozens and dozens of J6ers on my platform to share their story. I have helped J6ers crowdfund for themselves to raise money at a time when I needed money myself.
Can I interrupt you really quick, Alpha? When you've interviewed a lot of J6ers, I've interviewed a bunch. Who stands out to you as somebody that you think was emblematic of a role model for a J6er? Who has been the person that you would go, wow, I'm leaning into what they're doing because of X, Y, and Z?
You know, his name's probably not popular. A lot of people may not recognize him outside of the community, but it's JD Rivera.
Okay.
And he's out of Florida.
Yep.
And when I saw this man's story, and then when I talked to him about it, one, to as a role model for me, to see him maintain his faith and when things were obviously, this is a time when there was little ways to find hope, given we're still under this Biden administration, and he maintained that hope. But then on top of that, I could see his worry. This man had no fear to go to prison. He had one worry, and that only worry was his family. How was his family going to be taken care of while he was gone for the months that they sentenced him? And he's actually one of the ones that I brought on my show. Also brought him on the Sit Rep show, veteran show, and we in the period of about 48 hours, were able to raise over $20,000 for this man. So his family was not going to have to worry about rent payments the entire time he was gone. And we're also able to get people to contribute to, grocery fund for his family. And just knowing that we were able to take a little bit of some of the worry that he was going to have to sustain. And then the reason he's still a role model is he was one of the ones that went away fairly early in this evolution of things.
Yeah.
And when he came out, he was still in the fight. Like
Yeah.
he didn't come out and be like, okay, this is done. I served, my time. This is behind me. I want to forget it. No, he stayed actively in the fight. He was still, he was preaching to people in prison. He even got a Bible for a guy that speaks a language he didn't understand, but they were able to figure it out. I mean, this man's dedication to just helping people at a time when he needed help the most in his life is one of the reasons I respect JD so much.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to interview him as well, gosh, a while ago. And it's when I was living on the other coast in Florida. And I remember talking to him, and it was just heartbreaking listening to this story. But at the same token, I recall he had such an inner peace and inner strength. He wasn't afraid. He was literally not afraid. And you look at people like Kirsten Niemela, right? She's been another one, a warrior, and she's gone out of her way to go and help other people in all sorts of situations, including most recently, she was in North Carolina delivering things and helping people and going on 4x4s up into the hills to deliver, supplies to people that lost everything. This is, I think, probably very, I don't want to say typical, but it is somewhat typical of J6ers who are resilient, those that have gone through this and seen the worst of our government and seen the worst of just the corruption aspect of it all, and those that were entrapped. I mean, how many little old ladies walked into the Capitol because the doors were opened by somebody that looked like Capitol Police? I really think a lot of those Capitol Police officers, frankly, were FBI or others in the government that were wearing Capitol Police officers' uniforms, frankly, to entrap people. Just like Ray Epps, hurting and shepherding people by the thousands from all over the place we're going to go in the Capitol and all this stuff. So, I really admire your position on this, because you're right. He is a lesser known name, but I do recall talking to him myself, and you may have been the one that introduced me. I don't recall who introduced me to him or how he got my phone number. It might've been from you, but yeah, quiet strength, very quiet strength.
Absolutely. To the point about the FBI and the crowd. So for those that don't know my background, it was in law enforcement, and I planned tactical operations when I was a detective.
Yeah.
And when the FBI a few weeks ago released the documents of, we had 19 or whatever the number was, when they were very specific, we had 19 UCs. Well, one I
Undercovers.
already, and yeah, undercovers. As soon as and I've had conversations with Kyle and some others, and we all agree on this, they were playing the word game, because that can be a factual statement, but it doesn't mean that's
all.
It's all, because you have terms, you have assets, you have plain clothes, you have, the question to ask them now is, how many employees or how many people of your knowledge were there for a specific reason tied to what you were doing? And I bet you that number exponentially grows, and it would be. And the proof behind this is, and most people in law enforcement will know this if they've ever been part of an operation, you plan according to the crowd size. So
Right.
you're not just going to have 19 people involved in something with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people.
Right. So I spoke to somebody the other day who's in the intelligence world, and I'm not going to put anybody's name on blast, but I know the gentleman in which he's referring to, somebody who actually used geofencing and actually has the geofencing data of every cell phone that was there that day and the locations of them. I'm wondering if that information is going to make its way into a real J6 select committee and they're going to actually look, and we'll be able to determine how many were actual feds and how many were just, they are patriots there to, have their grievances redressed. I have to believe that is going to come out. I do not believe that anybody who was there that entrapped others will get away with this. And I think, I'm asking you, what do you think the punishment for those people should be? The actual entrappers.
Well, the one thing, and make sure you communicate these to your people, because we've used this software before in law enforcement.
Hmm.
And if they just request the data that they use in the investigations, that's not all of it. They need to request everything from the moment that they started using that software, because if they have people they know are going to be there, they can plug those numbers into the system, so the system bypasses it and doesn't pick them up. So you can actually have results that print out that don't have anybody's information. So they need the entire operational data
Interesting.
using that, because then that's going to show, oh, these numbers were bypassed, and then you can ask the questions, why were these numbers bypassed? And then it's, because they were inside the crowd. I think the punishment should absolutely be what fitting to whatever the allegation is. And in this case, we're looking at a lot of treason. We're
Oh
looking
God,
at
yeah.
that they were the ones that were trying to not trying to steal. They stole an election,
Oh yeah.
and that is treason. And if they're found guilty for that, well, we know what the price for treason is.
Yeah. Yes, we do. It's a hefty price, that's for sure. It's a hefty price. Um, you've made a lot of so you've been working on yourself for the last actually, before I move into that phase of the questions, is there anything else that you want to add to, from your position, because you are law enforcement, you have a very good career in law enforcement, you've been seen and done, and you've done a lot of investigations. If you were running this J6 investigation, I know you've watched Ivan and his, Secretary of Retribution, and he's mapped out all of the players. I think he's done an incredible job being very articulate and specific about who the key players are, including Liz Cheney and Nancy Pelosi, but going down to Paul Pelosi and the sergeant at arms and all, the Capitol Police, architect, etc. What would you suggest if you were going to reimagine this investigation in the format in which it should be, where we're actually going to go and get the entrappers and the guilty?
The first thing is you have to review every case against every J6er that took place, and not just the ones that they brought, charges against. Every house that was raided, every person that was detained at work, every person that was called saying, "Hey, come into this field office." Every one of those things needs to be investigated, and the source of where that particular person came from needs to be investigated. Then you need to look at these agents, and they have to be investigated. You need to look into personnel files. You need to look into history. You need to see what kind of, are a lot of these people from the same class when it came through, the FBI training? Did a lot of these people work for the same supervisors? Because corruption is going to keep their network of corruption no matter how far they span out. And that's going to help you kind of develop the network of these people. And then you can go after them, because at the end of the day, these people are taking orders from someone. And we obviously, I specifically want justice brought to all these agents that defiled our oath. I also want to make sure that we find the source of where all this came from. Who in our administration was the one that put this into motion? Because if we don't find that person or persons, then it's only a matter of time before they wait it out and they do it again. So this investigation has to be something that they understand is going to be long term, but it's going to be thorough. Because the issue, and this is where the public has had a lot of issues with law enforcement, is law enforcement has been very stat driven and very media driven. And so
Hmm.
once law enforcement has gone to, like, we have these major numbers, and we have a story we can put out where we bust 2 kilotons of fentanyl, it stops. And that's the problem, because when you get that major bust, that's not the end of it. It's just a major bust. And this needs to
Right.
be something where you tackle down and take down the actual international or national crime syndicate. That's what needs to happen.
Do you think Kash Patel should be part of the dismantling of the FBI, or should there
I,
be the FBI reimagined?
I absolutely, so my opinion has changed on this one, Ann. So prior to Trump announcing Cash as his selection, I was like, completely do away with the FBI. It is
Hmm.
it is an agency we no longer need.
Hmm.
When he made the announcement for cash, I said, hey, we have the ability here now to get rid of the disease that's there and actually build this into an organization that exists. Because the reality is FBI, we when we hear it or we see it, we think of what we see in the movies. But in reality, that's not really how they are. You know, a lot of and Kyle says this all the time. They rely on your local office, whether it's your municipality or your sheriff's department. The FBI is really just there to offer us a budget to
Right.
do these major investigations and to kind of take it behind the
Sorry.
no, you're good. I was like, I wanted to make sure it wasn't me.
No.
It allows us to, you know, cross state lines and do things as you know when you get these federal oaths that you take to be a part of it. But with that being the case, now you have the ability to where one, you can make it a lot smaller, doesn't need to be as big as it is. And you can actually make it something where it can really supplement local law enforcement the way it should be.
Right.
Because we always talk about the kids. These things are about the kids. But local law enforcement truly doesn't have the budget and the resources to take these investigations where they need to go. And so when you look at cases like such as, you know, child trafficking or human trafficking, this is where if you had a legitimate FBI, you could actually have a successful law enforcement organization because then the FBI could come and use its budget. It could use its networking with agencies that cross state lines to make this collaborated effort to where you can actually bring a resolve to these types of cases. So if you can get rid of the corruption that's there and you can restructure what its focus is, then
Hmm.
yes, I think it's worth keeping. But first we got to get rid of the corruption that exists. And I think cash can do that.
Well, from your lips to God's ears on that, and I think cash can do it, but my concern is, and it's human nature, really, and this comes back on we the people. Number one, the FBI is not a chartered agency or a chartered essential service of the Constitution. It's not in there, right? So this is outside the Constitution. Number one. Number two, human nature is such that it is eventually it's just sort of reducing the size of cancer, and because human nature is what it is, it's only a matter of time before the corruption becomes systemic again. It's just human nature. And
You
so
know,
this is the eternal battle of good versus evil. And I think that you can, here in Florida, the FBI should never have gotten into Mar-a-Lago. But whose fault was that? Well, Rick Bradshaw, the sheriff of Palm Beach County, he could have done something to stop it. DeSantis could have done something. And that we allow the federal agency to have jurisdiction down here. And again, this goes into the corporatocracy of our country and zip codes. It's a layered thing that's gone on to basically steal the republic and supersede us with corporate, bylaws and rules and statutes and codes that allow them to gain access because we tacitly agree to their stupidity and their rules. So I
well,
look at this very organically, that stripping this away and putting the law enforcement back in the hands of the people, where the sheriff really should have this power, right? We should elect the guy based on how good he is, not on whether or not he's politically winded one way or the other. So I love Cash. I think Cash can do a great job, but I would hope that Cash would really reduce this down to just administrative looking at stuff and putting the power back and the investigation back out in the states and say, hey, we're looking at this. We've uncovered this with our tools. We're going to hand it off to you, Oklahoma, or to you, Florida, or wherever. Let us know if we can be of assistance. But to give these brown shirts power like they have today to come and bust in your house, oh, hell no.
you know,
Absolutely not.
so that is a very legitimate concern. And so here's one of the things that he can do that I think would make us all feel comfortable. And when I've said this, a lot of people have said, well, what are you talking about? I've told people is we need to get rid of municipalities. And I work for one. You know, my old agency, Cathedral City, it's a city agency. It's not a sheriff's department. And when I tell people we need to get rid of municipalities, the reason being is your police chiefs are not elected. They're appointed, and these are at-will employees for the city council, which means they're going to go with whatever's trending for the city council, which is going to be what brings in the city money. So they don't really have a focus on the crimes that the citizens are concerned with. They're more focused on what's not going to affect the revenue coming in, whether it's tourism or the commercial districts. So we need to go just all sheriff's departments. And I always tell people the good guys from the municipalities would get absorbed into the sheriff's departments anyway. So the good cops are not going to lose their jobs. Essentially, they're just going to be retitled after an updated background process. So once you had a nation that's only governed by sheriffs, because the sheriff is an elected position, which means if we don't like what he's doing, we the people can pick a different sheriff. Then this is where the FBI part can come into. The FBI doesn't have to be people, it can just be a thing. You can have, like you said, an administrative portion, and then you can have a supervisor and maybe an analysis person or team that doesn't have any enforcement powers, just analysis, that works at these field offices. And then the FBI is just made up of people that the sheriff sends over for a specific amount of time, whether it be 4 years or 6 years. And then these people are on a cycle out. So what it does is, one, it constantly puts every few years a new set of faces and bodies that are in there. And it's your local law enforcement that's just using the budget and source of the FBI, but there's no people there. So essentially, you're removing all the enforcement powers that an
Right.
FBI would have. And all they really become is just a mechanism that the sheriffs from all over the country can communicate with each other and have a
Right.
network there.
I think we're kind of saying the same thing, but coming at it from different tactics. And I think you're absolutely right. They should have zero authority to pounce in our state and, come and raid your house. That really should be the sheriff. They have to give a compelling reason why said American has done something that is against the law. And this is a much longer conversation, but I appreciate you at least tipping your toe in the water with it, because I think we're going to have to continue to have this conversation. And this is where the American people come into governance, self governance, where we have to say, you know what? I'm going to start going to my sheriff. I'm going to start having these conversations. I want to go to my county commissioners and talk to them about this, about how we can, say no to federal law enforcement and bring it home, but we'll rely on them for intelligence that maybe they have better tools than we do, things like that. So I appreciate that, Alpha. Last thing before I let you go, you have become sort of a self help voice out there, and you're really motivating people, to dig deep and take personal responsibility for self improvement. And I love this post. Day 17, built for the storms. Today, somebody was told they're dying. Today, a family got a foreclosure notice and doesn't know how to make it. That's real pain. That's real struggle. Now, imagine the mental resilience and grit it takes to keep moving forward when your entire world is falling apart. These cold plunges, they're more than a challenge, they're training for life. Every second in this freezing water is preparing us for the storms we can't see coming. Pain isn't the enemy, it's the forge. We're not here to crumble. We're here to endure, fight, and rise. Get stronger now, because one day you'll need it. And you've launched these cold plunges where you get in a pool or you stick your head in a ice bath or whatever. But it's becoming kind of a cult thing in a good way, where people are really engaging with this. What made you decide to do this, and how did you come up with this idea?
I wanted to continue to challenge myself. I, I going to the gym is a challenge, but it's also something I enjoy doing. I wanted to challenge myself, something that you just can't get comfortable with, but you have to do every day or very often. And so when I started researching into this, I saw some Joe Rogan podcasts, Andrew Huberman, Dr. Susanna Soberg, and I realized not just the health benefits, but the mental benefits of doing something like this. And these last 4 years, and we get the good emails, but then you also get the emails where you can feel people's anxiety and plight, especially after you interview like a certain doctor and you get overwhelmed because whether it's them or their kids, but you can hear the desperation. And what I've learned through a lot of these letters and emails and even personal conversations I've had with people is a lot of people have not developed this internal strength to deal with tragedy that's beyond just normal, the ups and downs of life. And
Yeah.
so I was like, you know what? I don't want to just tell people about something to do. Let me just live this for them. Let me show them that you can be in something that is painful, you can be in something that is uncomfortable, and that if you just make yourself focus on this, you can sustain it. And that's where this grit comes in of you know, we need the American grit of the 30s and 40s again.
Yeah.
And we see some moves of this country wanting to make America healthy again and different things like that taking. So this is me using, the people that follow me and to just be an example and show people mental resilience is one of the main keys to anything that's going on in your life, because God is number one, but then after that, you have to be able to make sure you are strong enough that you can fight a fight that you're all alone in, because you're not always going to have a support system around you. So
No.
this is just to make us independently strong.
Yeah, well, it's a great message, and I love the fact you're forging ahead against adversity, and you're weaponizing adversity into inner strength, which is really a great lesson for all of us. And through the fire rises, the phoenix from the ashes. And I say it's going to be the American bald eagle, not the phoenix, but we are rising. And you are one of those voices that I respect, revere, and saw immediately as somebody that was going to be a magnet for a lot of other people to find that inner strength and come together. And we are winning. We are winning this battle slowly. It's a slugfest, but President Trump did tell us that nothing good is easy. You have to fight like hell, and he said it: fight, fight, fight. And so you have definitely picked up that mantle and run with it. And Alpha, it is a pleasure to see you on the other side of 4 years of just an absolutely horrific situation, but you made lemonade out of lemons. And God bless you and your family for sticking with you through all this, and everybody that has supported you as well. It's all going to be okay. It will in the end be okay.
Absolutely. And I just want to say, for those that are listening, doesn't matter how hard your life is, you can win. So don't give up on yourself.
Yeah, never give up on yourself. Alpha, thank you so much. As always, where can folks follow you?
You can go to alphawarrior.tv. If you're watching on the great platform of Rumble, shout out to Chris. You can search out The Alpha Warrior Show. If you want to get in the information war trenches on X, you can follow me at X, Alpha Warrior X. And if you want to help support the fight that I'm in my cause, I do have a GiveSendGo. It's givesendgo.com/defend Patriot Luna.
Defend Patriot Luna. All right, Alpha, thank you so much. As always, God bless you. And we'll see you out there on the internet. Hopefully, I'll see you in person somewhere very soon.
Absolutely. Semper Fi.
Semper Fi. Take care. Wow, what a great guy. I remember meeting him, and he left an indelible mark in my brain. I absolutely just love that man. He's got such a great peace about him and a strength, and to sit next to him, you seriously feel it. He just gives it off, and you lean into it and you take from it in a very good and healthy way. So I'm so glad to see him on the other side of this. And to the trolls that think he's fake or whatever, you know what? You know where to go. Take yourself out with the trash. In fact, we're seeing the trash take itself out right now, as a matter of fact. By the way, some breaking news coming in. I just want to get to this. This is from President Trump, actually. Let me pull it up here. We actually have some exciting news. He says, we have a deal for the hostages in the Middle East. They will be released shortly. Thank you. And then he put this tweet out, or truth, I should say, excuse me. The epic ceasefire agreement could only have happened as a result of our historic victory in November, as it signaled to the entire world that my administration would seek peace and negotiate deals to ensure the safety of all Americans and our allies. I'm thrilled American and Israeli hostages will be returning home to be reunited with their families and loved ones. With this deal in place, my national security team, through the efforts of Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, will continue to work closely with Israel and our allies to make sure Gaza never again becomes a terrorist safe haven. We will continue promoting peace through strength throughout the region as we build upon the momentum of this ceasefire to further expand the historic Abraham Accords. This is only the beginning of great things to come for America and indeed the world. We have achieved so much without even being in the White House. Do you even need to be in the White House? Just imagine all of the wonderful things that will happen when I return to the White House and my administration is fully confirmed, so they can secure more victories for the United States. Well, that is fantastic news. I am really glad to see that. I know that a lot of people have been impacted by what has happened over there. And we continue to feel that. Our wallets for sure have felt it with the amount of money that we've sent over there, as well as other countries that, frankly, we shouldn't be involved in any of these. But we are, and here's where, it's what it is. I want to remind everybody that this show is actually sponsored by great sponsors like Augusta Precious Metals. And I actually am a person who believes in what I push. In other words, if I am behind something, it's because I'm doing it too. Gold and silver have always been a staple for people that just want to have, secured wealth. If you have accumulated any money whatsoever and you want to preserve it, gold and silver have always been the safe haven. It is actually doing quite well these days. If you are a gold investor, you know what I'm talking about. And I encourage anybody and everybody, if you have an IRA of $50,000 or more, head on over to Augusta Precious Metals. You can find the link in my description box below in Rumble, or you can call them at 888-782-9064, 888-782-9064. This is who I trust. I trust them. They give you probably a 6 phone call and Zoom meeting step before you actually make any investments. They really take the time to educate you. They'll offer you free information. You can download a free PDF and learn. You can get on a Zoom call with these folks. Like I said, they'll meet with you 4, 5, 6 times before they actually decide if you want to make the investment. But there is a minimum investment amount. So if you have an IRA worth $50,000 or more, I highly encourage you, head on over to Augusta Precious Metals and give them a call, 888-782-9064. Also, something else I take very seriously is my health. And in that light, I'd like to remind you that Steel Health is still very much alive and well. I just had my green smoothie not a couple of hours ago after I got done doing 7 miles, which I try to do every day with my dog Vegas, who's right down there sleeping and snoring on the floor. Hopefully you can't hear that. But this is a wonderful superfood solution for people who are looking to just maintain a healthy lifestyle, whether you want to lose weight, maintain, or build muscle. Pure plant-based protein is a wonderful solution. In addition to, they have hundreds of other products from beet juice and cherry juice and vitamins and dog supplements, children's supplements. There is a lot of different products that are in the superfood realm. And if you go on over to vandersteelhealth.com, vandersteelhealth.com, you can, get a coupon that'll save you a significant amount of money on your first order. So I highly recommend that you check that out as well. Okay, without further ado, we're going to move into the second half of our show here. And I said we have got a phenomenal show today. We are going to be basically exiting this slave nation. And part of that is the income tax. And President Trump has been alluding to that for quite some time. I believe members of Congress have just put forth a memo or a bill to dismantle the IRS, abolish it, which frankly it should be. My father's always said, fight organized crime, abolish the IRS. Well, we're going to have our next guests on that are going to be talking. Joe Bannister, who was a former IRS agent, has also now been a big voice out there. We had Sherry Peel Jackson on a few months ago. She was also a former IRS agent, another big voice, as well as Payman Madahede, who has got Freedom Law School. And he has been a massive resource for patriots all over the country to help get them out of, basically donating money to a government that continues to donate that money to our adversaries and to people that don't benefit us. Hell, they're donating it to the United Nations that is flooding our country with millions of illegals. Defund the UN, exit the UN, and we can close our borders. And that's a big part of solving the problem in this country. It's going to save us billions of dollars and a lot of headaches with crime and drugs and rape and trafficking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So without further ado, I am going to cut us over to the next segment, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a teaser on what's coming. Thanks for sticking with us. I appreciate it.
And inside the report, I basically centered on 3 allegations. Due to the constitutional limitations, most Americans are not required to file returns and pay income tax. That was the first allegation or claim. The second one was that the 16th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was never legally ratified. And the third allegation was that the U.S. government finances its operations from the unconstitutional creation of fiat money, not with revenue from income taxes. So how do you think that got accepted by my supervisor? Well, with the report, I sent along a transmittal letter, and the basic message there was, look, I've devoted everything I could to doing a sincere job in investigating these claims. And I ended with, if the IRS declines to conduct its analysis or dismisses the evidence, then I must tender my resignation. My oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States was made to God, and I cannot serve 2 masters. Well, naive little Joe who thinks that maybe all these other agents that took the same oath that I did and are supposed to abide by the same guidelines that I did,
The Democrat Party needs to be renamed what it really is. It is a communist party. So the labels don't matter. Back in Soviet Union, they didn't call themselves necessarily communists. They call themselves Bolsheviks. So the Democratic Party is completely taken over, hijacked by communists. Then you got the rhinos, the Republican Party. Then you got us, the Trump America First people, who like Congressman Ron Paul for America, freedom, the Constitution first. Stop filing and paying income tax and help the IRS employ lower. One of the things they keep doing in the media, which is a big problem, is they keep painting the IRS as this powerful entity. And one of the things I want American people to know, folks, they are not powerful. It's all propaganda and lies again. For example, the 87,000 IRS agent you keep hearing about. That is a lie. IRS has only about 80,000 agents, and by 2008, IRS says over 50,000 or 80,000 will be gone, mostly by retirement. So Congress allowed the IRS to hire 8,700 new employees every year for 10 years to make up for that. And most of these employees are not gun-carrying agents like Joe Vandersteel was. Vast numbers of them are simply clerks who take your paper returns and type them up on the IRS's antiquated 1960s computers. So if people take the time, go to our website and see for themselves, IRS is over 99% bluff and is literally imploding like the communist Soviet Union. We could have this beast destroyed. We can have the deep state destroyed a lot sooner, even before Trump gets into office.
How ripe it is for investigating by the government as to what the truth is about the federal income tax system. So Mr. Trump, President Trump is certainly my man. He was in 2016 and 2020. And I think he's clearly a candidate that cares about our country. And our country it's on life support. It needs a doctor, a trauma surgeon, and Donald Trump is the only trauma surgeon running.
There is no law, and to date, nobody has been able to show that there is a law for the average American citizen working day in and day out to pay an income tax.
But We the People Foundation for Constitutional Education put a full-page ad in the USA Today on July 7th, 2000. And within the body of that ad was a $50,000 challenge for anyone that could show the law. And to me, $50,000 is a lot of money. So I went after that and did the research based on the fact that I thought, let's put this baby to bed. I'm hearing all these rumors. I'm going to kill two birds with one stone. I'll answer these people's questions that are asking me, and then I'll win this $50,000. And, based on the research that I did throughout the year 2000 and that I'm still doing, I have not found that law. I've asked Congress. We've asked a lot of people in the IRS commissioners, helpers. They can't answer, because if they answer, the American people are going to know that this whole thing is a fraud.
There is no law. There is no law that requires the average American worker in the private sector to pay a direct unapportioned tax on their labor and compensation for services. There is no law.
I really expected that, of course there's a law that you can point to in the law book, the code that requires you to file a tax return. Of course there is. Maybe I don't know what it is right then as he was speaking to me, but sure. So naively, I agreed to go off and research it and get back to him. 3.5 months later, I was at that point where I couldn't find the statute that clearly made a person liable, at least not me and most people I know, and I had no choice in my mind except to resign.
I had to leave the IRS because I presented evidence that I had accumulated indicating that the agency was violating the law and violating people's rights. And I asked the agency for a response to my sincere concerns. And the answer I got was that they would not respond to my concerns and that they would provide me with the paperwork necessary to tender my resignation.
You can look through the statutes and look for the law that requires you to pay. And when you do that, you can't identify a law that requires the average person in America who earns a wage and works in private business to pay an income tax.
American citizens, along with the foundation, have been asking the IRS to specifically provide them with the underlying legal foundation upon which they administer and enforce the personal income tax laws in our country.
At the national level, when people would attempt to contact somebody of a much higher authority, say the commissioner, same kind of thing. They would get answers that were in effect non-answers.
You have to understand that an agency which will unlawfully impose a tax that doesn't exist is not going to care. If we, the people, don't know what our rights are, they're not going to tell us.
If Americans just learned that the IRS was actually knowingly deceiving them, that would be enough for them to rise up and put a stop to it.
100% of what is collected is absorbed solely by interest on the federal debt. All individual income tax revenues are gone before 1 nickel is spent on the services taxpayers expect from government. People have been told, that you need this income tax system to fund government, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, my question is, well, if that's true, how did we fund government from 1776 to 1913?
The main purpose of the income tax is not to raise revenue, but to redistribute wealth and to control society.
A lot of people might say, well, gee, if there wasn't an income tax, what would happen to education? They don't understand that education is paid for the most part, out of state and local taxes, your property tax. People might say, well, how are we going to build and maintain our highways if there's no money coming into the government? We need our highways. There is a tax on every gallon of gasoline that people buy. Proceeds from the income tax do not pay for highway construction.
I believe that in both spirit and substance, our tax system has come to be un-American. Death and taxes may be inevitable, but unjust taxes are not.
This small booklet includes the Constitution of the United States, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence. This is a document that every citizen should read. It's a document which freed an entire nation. This is the Internal Revenue Code, and this document, and the unlawful application of this document by the Internal Revenue Service has enslaved the nation that this document attempted to free.
Well, there you go. That was a 9-minute montage of a lot of great information questioning the legality of the 16th Amendment. Title 26, in fact, never enabled or enacted into positive law. It has been a sham, frankly. It has been a complete crime against our country and, frankly, humanity, because humanity has been impacted by the IRS as these dollars that come in get basically offshored and used for nefarious purposes. None of the money the federal government has ever taken from any of us has ever been put to anything that is good. It has been put to everything that is evil and is wrong with our country and with our world. So the question remains, do you legally have to pay income tax? What is this all about, by the way, with President Trump's recent Truth Social posting about creating an external revenue service? Let me show you this right here, because I think this is freaking fantastic myself, where he talks about it and he says, let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger for everybody. For far too long, he says, we have relied on taxing our great people using the Internal Revenue Service, IRS. My father used to refer to that as organized crime or the Infernal Revenue Service. Through soft and pathetically weak trade agreements, the American economy has delivered growth and prosperity to the world while taxing ourselves. It's like self-flagellation. Hello, just light a match and self-immolate here. It is time for that to change. I am today announcing that I will create the External Revenue Service to collect our tariffs, duties, and all revenue that come from foreign sources. We will begin charging those that make money off us with trade, and they will start paying, finally, their fair share. January 20th, 2025 will be the birth date of the External Revenue Service. Make America great again. Well, in the spirit of that, is he adding another agency? And is he going to take away the IRS? Because frankly, he needs to abolish the IRS. It is just, it's, this thick of revenues or codes and statutes. Nobody can really understand it because they sprinkle it all over the place. Definitions of whether you're a U.S. citizen, a resident, non-resident, a national, what have you. And if you go through the U.S. code, which again, I remind everybody is corporate bylaws that have smothered the republic. We are no longer operating under our constitutional republic, the Constitution for the United States. We are operating under the Constitution of the United States. And if you look back in history and you understand the tariffs and the way we were structured before the income tax was ever layered in to suffocate us, you would know that we were never more wealthy than we had a system of tariffs. We had the most money we ever did in the Treasury in the late 1870s. And that was a tariff system. So I find Trump's truth post interesting because he wants to go back to that. And he has alluded to doing away with taxes on tips, and then it moved to personal income. And I believe that there's already a bill right now in Congress that they're putting forward about abolishment of the IRS. Hell, they should abolish the Fed. We should be out of the UN, NATO, all of it, because none of that existed in our organic constitution. But understanding all of that, we have a great guest joining us. So joining us after resigning from the IRS, Joe Bannister's transition from IRS insider to whistleblower, and he was in part of that montage that you watched, and tax education advocate, was greatly influenced by a call he got with a gentleman by the name of Bill Conklin. Conklin recommended to Bannister that he reach out to another gentleman, Payman Mottahedeh, and I've had Payman on the show before, for guidance and support. Mottahedeh then became a crucial ally, providing Joe Bannister with essential information and a network of trusted contacts, including experts, people that some of you even saw in the video. These are experts, activists, and former officials like G. Edward Griffin, as seen on the video, Ron Paul, personal hero of mine, attorney Larry Beecraft, and Ted Gunderson, remember the former FBI director? Well, with expertise in constitutional law and tax law, Beecraft, Gunderson, who was a former FBI agent, were particularly instrumental in helping Joe Bannister gain the credibility and navigate his new role within this community, skeptical of his former IRS position. This network not only protected Bannister from potential backlash, but also established credibility in the tax reform movement. He's now partnering up with Payman and the Freedom Law Group, and they're getting people out of IRS jams. Joining me now before Payman gets here, actually, I believe he is here, I'm going to bring in Joe Bannister, and we have Payman also here. They both arrived. How fantastic. Gentlemen, it is great to have you on such a momentous day as we are rolling into January 20th. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you for having us.
Big fan of the reports you do, by the way, with Michael.
Oh. Wow, thank you. That's huge praise coming from you. So I appreciate it, because I'm a huge fan of anybody who recognizes the guilt and shame that we've been put under by an unlawful, illegitimate, unconstitutional agency known as the Internal Revenue Service. So hats off to you, both of you, for calling balls and strikes on that. So I want to start a little bit with a little bit of history. Payman, you're the founder of the Freedom Law Group and Freedom Law Academy, excuse me. And you've done great work for a lot of my Patriot friends out there that get into these tax jams. Are you getting them out of tax jams, or are you getting them to just completely stop filing? What is the sort of the base understanding of what you do?
Just stop being a slave. Stop filing those 1040 income tax forms that the IRS uses against you to put you in prison. Stop confessing you owe the IRS money, and you can legally and safely stop the employer from stealing that money from your paycheck, called withholding, and sending it to the IRS. So that's the focus of us, is to do that, as well as write the congressman to do the proper oversight of the executive branch, the IRS, the DOJ, as well as some crooked judges who are keeping us as slaves by misapplying the income tax to the people of the 50 United States that do not owe this money to the government at all.
I agree. And there's lots of great resources that are out there now that come in all sort of flavors. Joe, I've watched your videos before. I've seen you on snippets. I've played that snippet about the IRS. There is no law that says you have to pay tax on your income and your labor. I've played that so many times in my shows. I hope people have kind of started to sniff it out and get the reality of the situation, because it appears President Trump is. But you really are sort of that person that was out there as an insider in the IRS that got caught up when you started doing taxes for other people and acting as a CPA and getting them out and amending returns. You got in trouble with the United States government, and they try to kick you out of the IRS, and you've been in legal battles back and forth. Give us a little bit of a background on yourself.
It's been quite a while now, but 1993 through 1999 is when I served as a special agent, an IRS criminal investigator. And I really expected to spend a full 20-year career with the IRS. But about 3 years into my career, I came across some information indicating that the tax laws weren't being administered and enforced as written, as they actually were passed by Congress and signed by a president. And so, being that I had taken an oath to support and defend the Constitution, and that that oath meant a great deal to me, especially since it was taken to God, I began to look into these claims. And I had a bias, which was the kids can't possibly be true. I mean, how could I be enforcing, laws, carrying this gun and badge around, and that these claims are true? So I spent about 2 years off duty, evenings and weekends, and digging using all of my expertise. I was a certified public accountant at the time, and then, sworn as an IRS special agent. And after about 2 years, had to reluctantly conclude that the claims that, most Americans weren't required to pay the federal income tax was actually true. And so, being that I was working at the IRS, I literally went to my supervisors, and the Treasury rules of conduct, not to mention my oath, dictated that I was supposed to speak up. They when they talk about see something, say something, Treasury rules of conduct have a similar duty that you're supposed to let your supervisors know if you encounter fraud, waste, or abuse. So, of course, seeing evidence that the agency as a whole was actually enforcing the income tax outside of the boundaries of the law, I had a duty to speak up. So I did. And, everyone that I spoke up to at the IRS took the same oath that I did. But unfortunately, they didn't see their duty the same way I saw mine. And I was basically suggested that I resign from my position. So I resigned on my birthday on February 25th, 1999. Interestingly enough, the birth of the income tax was February 25th, 1913. And I was born February 25th, 1963. And I resigned on February 25th, 1999. So there's something.
God has a funny sense of humor, doesn't he?
Yes. So after I left the IRS in February of 99, I began to just continue to seek answers, petitioning the government, which of course Paymon has a lot of guidance about doing, petitioning for redress of grievances. Hey, I've got all this evidence that I gathered as an IRS criminal investigator, and it's indicating that there's, the IRS is basically operating outside of the laws that have been passed by Congress and signed by, previous presidents. What's going on here? And as you mentioned, then by the time 2004 came about 5 years after I had resigned, they decided, well, I know what we'll do. Let's rope Joe into a conspiracy with one of his clients that he filed false federal refund claims on federal amended tax returns. And so that led me to being indicted in November of 2004. And my criminal trial was in June of 2005. And amazingly, not to me, but to the jury, here I was sitting being accused of preparing a bunch of false tax returns. And none of the government witnesses could point to a single false entry, paragraph, section, or page on the tax returns that I had prepared. And so the jurors are scratching their heads saying, well, wait a second, we're here because they say that this guy sitting at the defense table has prepared these tax returns falsely and then signed under penalty of perjury that they were true. Where's the false entries? And the government couldn't come up with any because there weren't any. And the jury's saying, well, why are we here? Why are you prosecuting this guy? And so, thankfully and deservedly, I was acquitted of all those charges. And that was way back in June of 2005.
Yeah, it's unbelievably, shall we say, exhilarating to see and to sit across the computer from you right now. Because again, people have said to me for years, "And you're crazy. This isn't true. It's all patriot mythology. That this whole corporation thing is fake, and the U.S. code is real." Well, it is real if you're talking about a corporate government, which we have. Right, we do have a real problem, and so we have layers upon layers upon layers. And Paymon, in that instance, you've had to decipher this. You have 30 years, I think, under your belt where you've had success after success after success, and here we are listening to Joe. Same thing, guy from the inside understood that the people were getting ripped off from their own government, and he was realizing he was breaking laws. He was doing something against the Constitution, hurting the people. So he stepped into the ring and took on Goliath and won. Absolutely won. Acquitted right here. Jury acquits former IRS special agent of felony tax charges. Paymon, give us sort of a look at how many people like Joe you've run across that come from the inside, but compare that to how many people that aren't insiders that have come to you, having been destroyed by the IRS. And how have you sorted this out? What's that journey been like?
Well, actually, the reality is that IRS is a big myth. Okay, when you stop filing 1040 income tax confession form, IRS has chosen to leave you alone since 2016. There's about 80 million non-filers according to IRS's own best estimates. So it's a myth that IRS comes after you if you file, if you don't file. It's when you file that they mess with you because you signed under oath. They'll deal with the IRS money. You're asking for all kind of breaks, exemptions, and credits and deductions, from that confession you gave on your own. So the best thing to do is for people to just simply don't file. You will be left alone by the IRS over 99.9% of the time. All of this is at Freedom Law School's website for free at freedomlawschool.org. And people don't need to be afraid of the government. The good news is this communist organization, it's really slavery. IRS is actually falling apart from within, just like the former communist Soviet Union did. So that is something that people find very unbelievable, but they can see that all the documentation from U.S. government's official legal websites and reports at freedomlawschool.org. And I want to work with Trump, if I can get to him, that we need to tax imports. We need to tax people that come to work in America as immigrants. They can pay income tax because they have the privilege of coming to work in here. Also, Harvard and these universities that bring foreign students, we can tax that as well. So they don't get to make more money from those immigrants too. We the people do. We can get rid of the income tax completely, lawfully and safely, and still be completely 100% safe like we had in 1900s.
Well, so let's walk through that. And I'm going to ask each of you to kind of give your position on this. Let's just say tomorrow, or let's say Trump's in office. It's January 21st. He's been in office and he has got Congress to agree, and they're going to now abolish the IRS. It's gone. There'll be nobody collecting revenue. But we need, obviously, if we're going to go back to the constitutional form of our system, tariffs is what we did. And that was when we were the most wealthy, was under tariffs. So walk us through, what does it look like to untangle us? I'm going to ask Joe first. What does it look like to untangle us from this IRS? Can we just do it? Okay, that's it. We're done. Nobody filed. You're over it. Is it just that simple, or is there more to it? And what does that look like to move to a tariff system?
Well, I mean, the IRS has been a nasty thorn in everyone's side. It's the 800-pound gorilla. I would say that, Paymon and Freedom Law School, hands down, they know how the gorilla operates. He's had 30 years to figure it out, down to a fine-tooth comb. But the fact of the matter is the laws as written don't embrace the average American living and working in the United States. That's a fact. And so what we need is for, honorable people in an administration to just simply look at the facts, recognize the facts, and recognize that the IRS is enforcing the income tax, outside of the boundaries of the law. So there doesn't need to be any law change, in my opinion. What we need, though, is a Department of Justice that isn't grinding up anyone like myself or Paymon or anyone else who are trying to just get the truth out to the American people. And that's what the DOJ and the IRS have been doing, since the 60s. Is just anytime somebody tries to get the word out to the people, they get targeted for prosecution, for ruining of their reputation. Like in my case, I lost my CPA certificate because the IRS, railroaded me through this disbarment process, and anything they can do to just keep the American people from learning the truth. So in my opinion, the laws don't even need to change. It's just that the American people need to en masse learn the truth, learn that they've been deceived for over 100 years.
Yeah.
And an administration like we should have in 4 or 5 days, if they're really mean what they say, this can be a new beginning in the country where we actually have honesty in taxation and the constitutional boundaries are observed.
Is this really a matter of people, just like Paymon said, you don't file anymore? Is there any sort of status correction that needs to be had? Because from what I've learned, becoming a U.S. citizen as we became in 1868 with the 14th Amendment, which I contend is constitutional, and they set up paragraph 3 specifically for what we saw happen. People tried to redress their grievances, and they called it an insurrection. So that's why they were trying to hang President Trump. And I feel like that was sort of a stink bomb put into the 14th Amendment for the day that we all woke up and realized we were getting screwed over by our own government. And they stole, they were stealing our country and, basically stealing the republic. Do you think we need to correct our status and get us back to that of an American national, where we live in our states and we're citizens of our state, and go back to the Union of States and really just shrink this government? I mean, would abolishing the IRS go a long way to that, Joe?
Well, I think Paymon would have some good commentary here also, but basically the American people do not realize how limited the federal government's jurisdiction actually is. They can get their tentacles out into the states through funding, grants, and that's where the strings get attached. But I think there's really no need to adjust status or express what your status is. It's a matter of just the American people learning how restrained the federal government's jurisdiction actually is. And I think that then your status as living in a state and each state is sovereign, and that there were a federal union, all those checks and balances are still there. It's just that the American people are largely ignorant of how they work and how strong they are.
Correct. Paymon, I mean, I'd like your thoughts on this. How do we rein this in?
Well, I agree with Joe in that as a whole, we the American people have been brought up ignorant to the public school system, the government schools. They teach us we are one country. We are not. We are actually 50 countries plus one. Each state is a country. Florida, Texas, California, they're all countries within the union, just like in Europe, you have Germany, Italy, and France are union of those countries or states over there. So Joe is right. The federal government has very little jurisdiction in the states, but we're not taught that. So we are already, all of us, U.S. citizens, U.S. nationals, state citizens, no different than George Washington, and we don't have to do anything different. We just got to recognize that we were free. God gave us our rights. The government is only there to secure those rights. And they just deceived us. For example, they use in the tax laws the term U.S. citizen, and we think, oh, that means me. I'm from America. But they use deception. U.S., United States, in tax law generally means District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. So when you say you're a U.S. citizen, you don't realize you said that you are actually from District of Columbia, which you are not. So all of this education is available for free at freedomlawschool.org for people to educate themselves. That is the key, education, and then just take back our country en masse, and the whole communist empire that Washington, D.C. is will collapse of its own weight by lack of support of the American people, just the same way the communist Soviet Union collapsed in 1991.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've made this very difficult for people to understand. And I think if people stop trying to decipher their gobbledygook and codes and rules and statutes and recognize those don't apply to us, they have tried to obfuscate the reality of the situation. Zone improvement parcels, a zip code, right? They consider that a federal jurisdiction, like Guam and Puerto Rico are federal jurisdictions. Washington, D.C. is a federal jurisdiction. It's a foreign entity. And when you cross into that, you are abiding by their rules and you're agreeing. Sort of like going to another country. If you do something that's against the law in another country, they can prosecute you. I mean, hopefully your embassy is going to help you, but at the end of the day, it's going to be their rules versus whether or not they can negotiate with us. That is what happened with J6. But I also see them using this sort of word salad and definitions like person, right? It can be a corporation or a people. It can be a nonprofit or a for-profit. This is all stuff that's buried in Title 26, the tax code. And I guess, Joe, since you are, someone that worked in the tax environment, you work for the IRS, what was the first tip for you? Was it the word salad and all this sort of linguistic gymnastics, word semantic gymnastics that you recognize as fraudulent? Or is it just the fact that you realized if you looked at our Constitution, we were supposed to only tax based on tariffs and not what they're doing to us today?
Well, probably, I mean, I have to take fault for myself, but also if you look at my training and experience, when you get a degree, my degree is from San Jose State University in California, and you take a tax class, and the tax class isn't about the foundations of the income tax and the constitutionality. It's more about, what deductions can you take and how much mortgage interest can you deduct, and is this kind of is a loan taxable, and things that are very superficial compared to the inner workings, the nuts and bolts of the income tax. And then I took the CPA exam and studied for that. And so again, it's more of a surface level of education and experience. And then the IRS had its own tax training. So I think it was basically someone, DV Kid, maybe some of your audience is familiar with her, being on the radio one day and opening my eyes to, hey, why don't you look at the foundations? Why don't you actually look at the Internal Revenue Code or the Supreme Court cases rather than what the IRS says about those cases and about those laws? So that was basically my first eye-opening was, hey, you're a CPA, you're an IRS criminal investigator. You've got the competency to go to the source. Let's look at the actual Internal Revenue Code rather than a textbook. Let's look at the Supreme Court cases and read them rather than just look at what the IRS has to say about them. So that was really the way that I began to recognize that, hey, I don't need to be a lawyer to read a law, read a statute or read a court case and
Right.
see what was said about it. And of course, the Supreme Court will then refer to previous court cases, and so that you can just take the court's own opinion of their prior cases and draw a really solid conclusion.
So my next question, then a follow up to you, and I'm going to direct this to Paymon, but then I'd like Joe to come in and sort of address this, is the Chevron doctrine, Paymon. We're starting to see bills put forward and suggestions that we need to dismantle agency government, which is music to my ears. You're not going to hear me boo-hoo over that. I think the people in a private capacity where we're not foxes guarding hen houses, as we've seen in Big Pharma and the FDA, and we can just go through them all. They all have their shills in these agencies. And of course, the OIG is another joke, right? These Office of Inspector Generals are sitting in the agency that they're supposed to be, for overseeing. It's just ripe for corruption, and human nature being what it is, we have to eliminate that temptation to take this grease, right? The palm grease. So Chevron doctrine, Paymon, how is that going to impact the future of the IRS, or will it have any impact on it whatsoever?
It really won't, because all it was basically the court said we're going to do our job and do not defer to the interpretation of the executive branch about
Right.
what the law means. That's all it really is. What the
Or the
fundamental
agency.
thing,
They were deferring to agencies, though, as well,
right?
correct?
They were doing,
Right.
but there was ambiguity in how the law perhaps gave some power through regulations to the executive branch. They said we're
Right.
going to defer to the agency's opinion about this issue, but that was wrong. And now they're going to go about what the courts are supposed to do, which is they interpret the laws versus relying on the executive branch to interpret the law that they come up with the regulation themselves they're enforcing. The thing about IRS is that I came from Iran, as you know, in 1977 at age 14, and I thought America was land, the free home of the brave. I was so glad to be this greatest country that ever lived. I loved America. I loved it when I saw it on TV screen as a child, growing up in 1960s in Iran. So come to find out, wait a minute, why is this country not as free as it was advertised to be? So that's what got me into all this stuff in 1992. And I heard about income tax on a talk radio, kind of like Joe Bannister did. That was interesting back then, was talk radio shows. And I got into it. I thought, whoa, this is amazing. We are not supposed to be slaves of the federal government. Work, give an annual statement under oath to our slave owner government, how much we made, and beg for them to accept our deductions and expenses. That's not the way America was meant to be. When I found out that it's all based upon deception and our ignorance, I went 2 feet in. And my goal has always been to educate and inform the Goliath to wake up. The Gulliver. The Gulliver has been tied down little by little by this corrupt little bureaucrats, the system that we got corruption. All we gotta do is wake up and take the chains off. And we can have America be free of the income and payroll taxes completely overnight and go back to the tariffs and taxing foreigners that made America great throughout the 1900s.
Yeah, I agree. I'm looking forward to restoration of that. I think that the highest revenue we ever had in this country was in the late 1800s, 1870s, 1880s, based on tariff revenue, and we didn't have income tax. So to restore that would, I can't even imagine what the next phase of our stock market and financial health is going to look like in this country when we restore sound money and we abolish the Fed, another albatross on all of us that just arbitrarily, they can lower rates, but the banks don't, right? The banks are still raising rates on mortgages while the Fed is lowering them. And so the arbitrage between the two, of course, banks are having record profits today. The banking reports coming out, and it's insane. People are homeless, right? They can't afford mortgages. Everything is so out of, the hyperinflation, et cetera. All this has got to be completely reset. Joe, that question I asked Paymon, there's a blog out there that I've followed from time to time, just out of curiosity. And they have a little bit of a different perspective on this. And I just want to get your perspective. And it goes back to the Chevron doctrine or Chevron deference reversal by the Supreme Court. They believe, and this is a blog that caters to the business community, that this change will lead to an increase in taxpayer challenges to IRS issued regulations and to greater uncertainty surrounding the application of the Department of Treasury regulations that are enforced by the IRS until Congress further clarifies a statute or Treasury issues new regulations that withstand judicial scrutiny. They may be behind the curve, particularly if President Trump is going to abolish the IRS. But do you see a little bit of wisdom in what they're saying, or do you line up with Paymon on his assessment?
Well, I guess I'll set aside whether they're saying this like out of concern for the IRS, because I don't have any concern for if the IRS has to squirm more, that's what they deserve.
Good.
What I've seen, though, is the IRS, like Paymon, again, would probably be better to talk about this, but Section 1 as just one example of how the IRS will create, and with the Treasury Department in tandem, will create these regulations that are outside of the statute, outside of the boundaries of the statute. And isn't that what Chevron was basically talking about, is where the agency, especially with the IRS, because if our claim is true, which I've staked my entire life and reputation on,
Right.
that the laws don't apply. They're there, they're constitutional as written, but they're not enforced as written. And so what the IRS does is through their literature and the media and the regulations, they try to bootstrap authority that isn't there in the laws as written. And
Right.
so I think that you better believe it's going to cause uncertainty. And I'm glad to see it. I just don't know if it'll be quick enough. And that's why I think it's great. I'm really grateful that you have us on your show to talk about these issues, to try to wake up the American people, just like you have about the immigration issue and so many issues that you've certainly woken me up. So I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to talk about this topic as well.
Well, I think this is probably one of the most important talk. I mean, we've got J6 prisoners that need to be, commuted, their sentences immediately commuted, and pardons following as quickly as possible. Obviously, there's some people that have weapons charges and whatnot. We got to go through that, but we got to really define what the weapon was. Was it a Coke bottle? What are they defining as a weapon? Because as far as I know, the only people that got shot were patriots, and they were shot by the government. So, there's that, setting that aside. We've got to deal with that. We've got obviously President Trump, releasing information today about the hostages being released, and, a peace deal is forthcoming in the Middle East. He's not even in office and he's negotiating these things. This is the power of what this man brings to the table, which I think is extraordinary. But, one of the biggest problems I see in our country that has allowed us to be, degenerate to the point where we find ourselves today is the fact the IRS forced both parents into work. It reduced the nuclear family when both parents had to work in order to afford food on the table because taxes were robbing people blind. And that has led to the degeneration of the nuclear family. It's led, and then of course, the public education system, Jimmy Carter, the Department of Education, all of it is this layered approach to destroying the republic and the people that have made this country so great through ignorance and not understanding, not because they're not smart. They're ignorant to what they don't know. It's that I don't know what I don't know category. And this topic, I think, if you can give people, a 30% boost in their bottom line by getting out of the income tax, that goes a long way to restoring the nuclear family. It goes a long way to people's wealth and health and being able to afford their own future, as opposed to relying on the pittance of Social Security, which is eclipsed by the amount of money that illegals are getting paid. I mean, the injustice just goes on and on and on with what they're doing to us. Paymon, when people come to you and go, well, if I'm not paying my income tax, does that mean I don't get to draw Social Security? What do you tell them?
Well, they can if they want to, although I'm not a socialist, that I don't believe any of this socialist schemes at all in the first place. But if people want to take that money, they can, because they were duped and deceived to pay into this corrupt system that the money was spent right away. There was no such thing as a Social Security trust fund to begin with. But we need to have a way to phase people out. The thing of this whole dependence on the U.S. government, and we can do it. The biggest items of a budget is the military and all this welfare. But all this welfare, like we have Medicare, things like that, are they actually funding the big insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, the hospital systems that are become corrupt? They're not really helping people. Okay, when Robert F. Kennedy Jr. takes care of this corrupt medical health system that we have, we can cut that budget tremendously. There's so much waste and fraud in the Department of Military that we can save a lot of money. And only 6% of federal workers show up to job to work full time. So we can get rid of all this stuff that's going on out there and be completely safe. But the challenge is educating Americans not to be afraid of our public servants. IRS works for you and me. But the problem is we don't have the knowledge to have the confidence to deal with our own public service in the IRS, and I've been under criminal investigation and other investigations by the IRS for over 30 years before I even started freedom law school, way back starting in 1994. Here I am, not in prison. IRS has never tried to indict me. Joe Bannister, the IRS shut him up by indicting him, and they lost a shot back in the face, and they're leaving Joe Bannister alone. And neither one of us, for over 25 years, have filed or paid any federal income payroll, or self-employment taxes. So American people, you have a chance to be free. All you gotta do is plug it in. Go to freedomlawschool.org. The information is there for free. So you can be free, have America become a free country once again together.
Yeah, it's just tremendous what you've managed to do and to prepare people and to show people how they can get around from this. I call it the slave labor albatross. You know, when they wrote the original 13th Amendment, right? It was originally about no titles of nobility shall be serving in public office, and they rewrote it in the tumult of the Civil War and made it about freeing the slaves. And then they sort of put that into the 14th Amendment. I think it's clause 2, where they talk about involuntary servitude. I may be inaccurate about which clause it is in the 14th, but they call it involuntary servitude. But they left the door open. Again, word salad. Well, what about voluntary servitude? And that is, in fact, what the income tax is all about. You are volunteering to donate a portion of your money, and you're going to say, well, based on your rules, codes, and statutes, I think it's only this much because I'm signing up to give you my total income. But I think through all the loopholes, I can get it to here that I'm going to donate. And then they're going to go, aha, you cheated us on your donation. You know, I mean, this is just how sick it is. But they've allowed, and this is why I'm a big proponent for erasing everything past the 10th Amendment. I think they're useless amendments and they're frankly fraudulent. But Joe, when it comes to, moving forward and getting people out of the system, what recommendations do you have? Paymon says, just don't file. You line up with that and square with that?
Well, I mean, interesting. I was accused by like a New York Times or people that have such a great reputation for telling the truth.
Yeah.
That like I tell people, do this and do that, but I don't follow it myself. As Paymon said, the last federal tax return I filed was in 1998, and but yet I don't tell people what to do. I do tell them that they should not be afraid, and if they have fear, at least try to work at reducing the fear by educating themselves. Because in my experience and the experience of everyone I've ever come in contact with, the more you educate yourself, it chases out the fear. And then once you are educated or you become more educated and your fear has subsided, you can think more clearly about what it is you want to do. Some people may be in a circumstance that it may not be as easy to just stop filing. So it's not a cookie cutter approach. And that's why I think, Paymon's website, he provides information where people can begin to apply the facts to their circumstances, right? And make those kinds of decisions. But for myself, I have to honestly say, I was prosecuted because of tax returns that were filed. You sign under penalty of perjury, and they can charge you with a felony. If you don't file a tax return at all, and the punishment for that is a misdemeanor. And Paymon also shows statistics that come from the government about the nosedive in enforcement. So I think people need to, educate themselves about the risks. And I think what they'll find, though, is the risks that they thought were there, they thought existed, don't exist, or largely don't exist.
What is the risk? I've read numbers like 1 in 250,000 will be audited, kind of a thing. What is the risk? Because Paymon made a case for, these 87,000 agents is really over the course of 10 years, and they're a dinosaur that's dying on the vine. And if Trump is serious and Congress will get behind him, I think we're going to see the end of the IRS. But what are the risks in today's environment of being audited and being held for a misdemeanor?
I mean, Paymon, he's got the numbers. I mean, I think it's in the hundreds out of a country of 340 million people. The prosecutions for misdemeanors may be even in the dozens or less. Felony prosecutions may be in the hundreds. And this is out of a country of 340 million people. You can do the math on that.
Are they going after the super wealthy and then making their way down to middle America? Because why bother for a couple $100 when you can get millions?
They're generally going to target. Of course, this was the case even when I was there and after. they love to target people that are super well known, like a Wesley Snipes. Earlier in the show, you showed the Bernhoft law firm who defended me successfully, obviously, but also people like Wesley Snipes. So they do like the big time movie stars. You know, if Elon Musk stopped filing, they, you know, but again, if you have an administration that understands that J6 prisoners are not criminals, that the DOJ broke the laws by spying on American citizens. You know, what we need is an administration that recognizes the boundaries of government and recognizes the heavy hand of government. And if that's taken off our necks and the American people learn the truth about the income tax, you know, it's going to be a new springtime, you know, especially over these next 4 years.
Yeah, I look forward to the people coming around to that great awakening, because it is high time. We have been the butt of our own government's jokes, and they've done everything. They're exterminating us from the skies, spraying us like roaches. They've injected, you know, millions and millions of people, billions, frankly, 5.5 billion around the world took that bioweapon. And, you know, we're seeing the fruits of that war crime, essentially. This is a regime of people that are worldwide that have a very sick ideology on where the world should be. We are really at their disposal, is how they see it. And our founding fathers designed this completely 180 degrees opposite of what is being delivered today. Our original Constitution, if we could ever get back to it, and I believe that's what President Trump is trying to do, restore the republic and get us back to the organic Constitution and strip these codes off and send these agencies out into the field as nonprofit organizations of volunteers, not from the industry in which they're regulating, supposedly. And I wouldn't even like to use the word regulation. It should be oversight. We've got to really clean this up, and it requires we the people. And what you're talking about in Paymon, you're talking about is education, and it's incumbent on the people having to learn. It's not just going to get into your head through your pillow. If you put the YouTube video of Paymon behind you, you're not going to learn it that way. You've got to engage in the process. And this is your life. God gave you the brain and some feet and arms. Do with it as you will. So, gentlemen, I am grateful for your time today. Joe, I was looking for social media for you. Where can people follow you? You're just sort of all over the place if they Google your name.
Joseph Bannister, it's at Joseph Bannister, I believe, on X.
At Joseph Bannister, I'm going to look for it because I couldn't find it. There's, I think, maybe a few, but I'll let
yeah, just one in and Bannister. We're the non.
Got you. Okay, I'm going to just put this out there so folks can see it, so they know how to follow you on X. This is your X account. Thank you very much. I'm glad that you told me that, because I did look, but I was probably spelling your name with 2 N's because I knew another Bannister way back in the day in boarding school, of all things. So I was spelling your name improperly. I apologize for that. And Paymon, I know that we can follow you at Freedom Law School. You also have an X account, but this is your website. You have done a ton of interviews. Thank you for your time today. I certainly appreciate it. And you do provide great resources. Is there anywhere else you want people to follow you?
Just freedomlawschool.org is the best place for people to take the 7 steps to educate themselves to be free.
Educate to be free. And that's really what it's all about. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. This is an exciting time. I certainly hope that President Trump will take a listen to the two of you and take a meeting and put his best and brightest minds around this, because I think we can abolish and remove that cancer called the IRS, and hopefully the Fed at the same time, and really get this country off to that transition to greatness that he's been talking about, meaning the best is yet to come. And I think it's going to come from people like you with advising him on the process. So God bless you both.
Thank you, Ann.
Thanks for having us.
You all have a great, absolutely have a wonderful day. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
You too.
Tremendous, absolutely tremendous to have resources like that you can bring on. And I'm proud to say, please go look at what they're doing over at freedomlawschool.org. Paymon has been a staple in this industry for a long time. I've known him for a long time. I know people who have used him, and successfully so. So this isn't rocket science per se. It's really looking at everything they've done in common sense, but it also goes back to the history of our country, and you need to know the history of our country. It's okay to not know it now, but it's not okay now that you've been told, right? If you are considering, if you are going to continue to fill out a 1040 or a W-2, and because you work for a corporation, there are other ways you can get out of having taxes pulled from your paycheck. This is what Freedom Law School is all about. So let Paymon help you and bring home an extra 10, 20, 30, 40% in your paycheck. Why not? I mean, it's money that's yours. You shouldn't have to donate it, and you shouldn't feel like you have to donate it, because that's in fact what you're doing. There is no law that says you have to pay personal income tax. I don't think I can say it more clearly than that. On that note, I want to remind everybody this is a show that is sponsored by people that I am very well invested in. And I just want to remind everybody, if you go on over to vandersteelhealth.com, this is a product. They have a bevy of products, but the one that I really rely on is my superfoods. I have these shakes every day. They are delicious. It's protein. It keeps me from, when I come home from a 7-miler and I drink one of those, I take my vitamins with it, etc. And I am good to go until about now, when I start to get a little hungry. Before I turn hangry, I'm going to say goodbye to you all, but please check out vandersteelhealth.com. I promise you, you are going to be thrilled with the fabulous. This is all, by the way, made in the USA, grown in the USA, organic, non-GMO, et cetera, et cetera. Great company, been around for 30 years, and I have been a user and a customer of theirs since 2021, January. So we're going into my 4th year, and I'm religious about the superfoods. By the way, I did lose 20 pounds after COVID on superfoods, just so you know. And then also, of course, if you are in the market for gold and you want to have a protection against inflation, which we see what's happening, but we also know President Trump, if you go through his Truth Social feed, you will see a lot of ads for gold. I use Augusta Precious Metals. These guys are fantastic. They are really consultative. They're educators. They will help you get up to speed on why gold makes sense for a portion of your portfolio. It's a hedge against inflation. It's also a hedge against other aspects in the markets, right? Stock market goes down, gold goes up. It's always kind of like this. You always want to have a portion of your wealth that stays relative to the value of the dollar. You always want to have a portion of that in your arsenal. And so if you have an IRA, for instance, that is got $50,000 or more, I highly recommend you give these guys a call at 888-782-9064. That's 888-782-9064. Or click the link below. It takes you right to this website. And, I just can't say enough about Augusta Precious Metals. I spent a lot of time with these guys on the phone, and they gave me one heck of an education. I could go as fast or as slow as I wanted to. There is no pressure. It is truly a consultative sale, and you will see these guys have the best customer service remarks, bar none, out there. I encourage you to compare them to other people in the business, and you will find out this is not a high-pressure company. So if you want to protect your wealth, by all means, head on over to Augusta Precious Metals. And without further ado, I hope you guys have a fantastic Wednesday. We are T-5 from Inauguration Day and T-4 from whatever President Trump has planned on January 19th. I think it's going to be extra special. I will be with the J6ers on January 28th. I am not going anywhere near DC. And I'm going to take the opportunity to give some J6ers here in Florida a hug as they get released from prison. I look forward to that. Stay tuned for more of that. I should be live that day when all that goes down. I hope you all have a blessed Wednesday. God bless everybody. Have a wonderful day.